the library. We're going to be covering mainly Gaming and Libraries, the Intersection of Services by Jenny Levine. So this is what the cover of it looks like. And as we read this, I want you to keep in mind that the year is 2006. And she really is trying to frame video games and libraries in a way that people will understand and accept, because video games are still almost strange and foreign to the library. They're not as natural as they are now. So the central thesis when she gets into chapter 1 is that video games are a legitimate and essential form of content that libraries should embrace, not just for entertainment, but for education, social engagement, and the cultivation of 21st century literacy skills. So the idea of 21st century literacy skills was really, really prevalent in the beginning of the century, from about 2000 up until 2008. A lot of library literature was talking about how do we prepare people for the 21st century literacy skills or 21st century literacies. Within this article, you're also going to see things like digital nomad, digital immigrant, and all kinds of these words that are kind of out of fashion now. But we've got to keep in mind that that was the mindset of the adoption of the internet, the adoption of social media as it's beginning to kind of implement itself into society, and video games as well. So let's jump into her key points. The first thing she's trying to do is she's really trying to reframe the question, why gaming in libraries, right? Because people are asking, why do we even have to have gaming in libraries? But instead, she really wants to reframe the issue by comparing video games to books. And she's drawing from Stephen Johnson's Everything Bad is Good for You from that book. And the comparison really is suggesting that if video games had existed before books, we might view reading as passive, isolating, and linear, unlike the socially and sensorily rich experiences of gaming. Her next main point is that games are legitimate library content. And she's arguing that if libraries already provide content such as romance novels, manga, movies, music, then there's no reason why they should be excluding video games, right? Just another form of media. It's a legitimate form of media. Remember, she really is using this argument that we need to legitimize video games in the library during this time. And basically saying that it's just another form of cultural content, just like any other media form, and the games are rich in narrative, character development, and world building. Her next argument is that libraries are third places. Now, I'm going to make a separate video going over the idea of third places, but she's really citing Ray Ollenberg's concept of the third place, where home is your first place, work is your second place, and then you need these third places. And it's one thing that America has been missing since about the 1950s. And that idea of the third place is that it's a neutral ground. So think of a coffee shop in France, or a German beer garden, a local pub in like a neighborhood pub in London, or even Ireland. These spaces where it doesn't matter what your social status is, but when you're at the bar, when you're at this pub, or when you're at this coffee shop, if you're at the city plaza, everybody's equal and everybody can talk to each other, and it's just a place for regular civics to take place. Now, it's a lot more complicated than you would see that gets the way it gets represented now popularly inside of places like TikTok, where people are asking for third places. And I'll go off on that in a separate video. But she is arguing for this, that gaming supports the role by providing a social and collaborative experience for people that isn't necessarily available to you in a private home. So video games do provide this third space for people. Her next argument is that games are a multimodal literacy, and that games develop a range of literacies. It gives you a textual literacy, a visual, a spatial, an auditory, and a procedural type of literacy. And Levine recounts how her son learned how to read and write primarily through video games, and that games engage users in interactive learning that really does align close with what educators value in experiential education. Next argument is that cognitive engagement in learning. So she draws on the work of Stephen Johnson and also James Paul Gee. So Levine presents games as cognitive workouts that develop your decision making and your hypothesis testing, your problem solving and critical thinking skills. And the players continually test, adapt, and reassess strategies while they're, in a sense, mirroring a scientific method. Every time that we play, we fail, and we learn from our failures to keep going. And that sense of resilience, that sense of open-ended Q&A and seeking and searching for information is happening consistently and constantly, testing your hypothesis, problem solving within games. So her argument is that video games are actually good for you because it's mimicking and mirroring the scientific method that we teach in schools. She also begins to attempt to debunk the myths about violence in video games. And it's a very broad brushstroke that she uses. But she basically says that it's media sensationalism that emphasizes the violent M-rated games, particularly Grand Theft Auto at this point, which is getting a lot of the attention of the media. So she does point out that 85% of games are rated E for everyone, or E10 plus, or T for teen, and that the titles are appropriate for libraries and that they are educational by nature and cooperative in nature. And her last point within chapter 1 is that it's the emergence of educational and advocacy games. So she notes the rise of serious games designed to promote empathy, awareness, civic engagement, such as Darfur is Dying, Peacemaker, The Food Force. And these games provide opportunities for libraries to engage patrons in very meaningful ways. She brings up a couple of case studies of games that she gives as examples. One of them is Katamari Damacy. She uses as an example how this like silly game that is basically like a problem-solving, puzzle-solving game, but it also contains backstories and characters with a big narrative depth. And it shows in that sense that games have a literary and artistic value in the same way that novels and films do by following these narrative paths. She also talks about Mario Kart Double Dash as an example of an information-rich gameplay requiring multitasking and prioritization. And it highlights how children can engage and process data rapidly while they're gaming. So they're developing visual, spatial, and audio literacy, but in a really fast pace. And I think what's interesting is several of you all may have been at the age that she's studying at this time, playing like Mario Kart Double Dash and some of the other games that you may be the youth that she's actually observing in the libraries at this time that are now becoming librarians. So I think that's an interesting thing to keep in mind while we go through these early versions of the library technology reports. She gives a personal anecdote of her son again, that he mastered the spelling of save, right, because he wanted to preserve his games, and it helped him and motivated him to read and to learn as he's doing that. And then she also mentions that, and I don't know, I don't buy this one, but that there's a 2004 study showing that surgeons who played video games performed significantly better in laparoscopic surgery. And she really tries to show this like real world connection underlying the broader skill development. Now I understand why she's making this argument, why she's using that study, but to me it's kind of a very extreme version and maybe makes people almost blow it off when you read it. Like, okay, sure, video games is going to make you a better surgeon. She also talks quite a bit about advocacy games. Once again, the Darfur is Dying, which teaches you about genocide awareness, or Peacemaker, which is about Middle East conflict, Food Force, which is about world hunger, and A Force for More Power, or A Force More Power, which is about nonviolent protesting. And these games really do serve as a way to teach civics, humanitarianism, and educational purposes. And overall, I think chapter 1 is it's a well argued, passionate chapter, really trying to get people to embrace video games, not just as entertainment, but she's really trying to show that extra side, that the content is the same as what we look at for library core missions of literacy, learning, access, and community. And that librarians, this call to action that she has in chapter 1, is that librarians need to challenge the outdated assumptions and adopt a broader view of media, content, and service.